Hi everyone, you should be able to hear me now. If you can't, we're going to go ahead and get started here in a second. I saw there's a couple of questions already in the box or in the chat box. I might have some time to get back to some of those at the end. However, we're going to go ahead and get started. This session is basically going to be an overview of studying in the United States. So it's kind of a very high level. There's going to be lots of other sessions going on today that will get more into specifics of studying in the United States. And I encourage you to attend some of those. Again, following this, there'll be everything from undergraduate admissions and funding, graduate admissions and funding. We've got people from different universities talking here in the United States. And so you have the ability to attend all of those throughout the day. The sessions are also all recorded and they're kind of saved in College Week Live's archive. So we definitely recommend you going back there. Even if you can't make everything today, go back. The platform is usually up for about a week. From what I understand. So don't panic. Make sure to spend your time talking to people. And I really encourage you to engage as much as you can with the people that are live today as well. So, okay, so we're going to go ahead and start. So basically, my name is Kevin Barta. I work for Education USA and the U.S. Department of State. So Education USA is a network of advisors around the world that help you in your countries learn about studying in the United States. We provide accurate, comprehensive, and current information to students, and we have hundreds of centers in right now about 170 different countries. So most likely there probably is a center somewhere near you, at least in your country. A total right now I believe we're at is 419 odd centers around the world. We also have a pretty robust online presence to help students who may not be near a center. Everything from online to mobile devices and a lot of social media. And we'll talk about some of that a little bit later on. So go ahead and go into our next slide. So what Education USA has tried to do is make learning about studying in the U.S. much simpler for you. So what we've done is we've narrowed it down to 5 simple steps. You have step 1, which is research your options. Step 2, complete your application. Step 3, finance your studies. Step 4, apply for your student visa. And step 5, prepare for your departure. And this is all set up on our website. I'll talk a little bit more about it later on, but it's also set up for different levels. So if you're an undergraduate student, there's very specific steps, 5 steps for you. There's 5 steps for graduate students. There's 5 steps for students interested in studying English in the United States. And there's 5 steps for students coming in for short-term programs, so usually 1 semester or a year at a time, or even less than that. And again, all that information is on our site, which I will give you more information about later in this presentation. Go on to the next slide. Currently, there's 819,644 international students in the U.S. There's actually probably more than this number because it doesn't always take into consideration a lot of the short-term programs or ones that may not be for credit. So that number probably is higher. Students come to the United States from all over the world, so Asia, Africa, Europe, Latin America, Middle East, North America, and Oceania. We'll go to the next slide. So did you know, many students, when they first come into one of our centers, one of their first questions is, can I have a list of all the universities in the United States? That can be a very hard and kind of tall order just because we have so many institutions in the United States. We literally have thousands. I believe right now the numbers, it's somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 universities and institutions in the United States. So quite a few. When you look at other countries, say like the United Kingdom, they have about, I think, 325-ish, something like that right now, of institutions of higher education. So it's a huge jump. And so that's why a lot of students get confused right away because they get into it and there's just so many options that's actually more the problem than understanding how to apply and get accepted to a U.S. university or college. So going on, so we're going to talk a little bit about the U.S. higher ed system. So I just mentioned to you how many institutions we have, and again they're very diverse, which I'll go into that a little bit as well. But one of the things that always also shocks students, and it shocks parents as well, is that we don't have a central government authority over all of these institutions in the United States. We have a U.S. Department of Education, but the Department of Education doesn't tell the institutions what to do. The Department of Education works primarily with primary school students. They also do work, obviously, with colleges, institutions, but it's not in a directive manner where they're telling them they have to meet certain rules. We have what's called regional and national accreditation, and these are organizations that kind of handle the accreditation and the approval process. And so, depending on where you're in the country, there may be different accreditation organizations that kind of handle this. Rankings, we always say there's no rankings because there is no official government ranking system of U.S. higher education institutions. There simply isn't. There are rankings in the effect of, say, U.S. News and Report and other organizations that put out their own rankings, but those rankings can be skewed in different ways depending on different criteria. And so we try to push students to choose a college and university or a program that's right for you. Don't just look at the rankings. The rankings don't completely give you the big picture, and they don't also take you into consideration of what your needs are. And we'll talk again a little bit more about some of these as we go through. There's also no national entrance exam. So we don't have one standardized entrance exam for all students who want to study in the United States. The admissions requirements vary by institution. So say one institution may say you need what's called an ACT test and a score to get into the university and apply for admissions. But another university in the same state may say we don't want an ACT, we want an SAT. And so you'll see differences like that that kind of vary throughout the country. In a lot of areas you'll see them accept both tests, but again you may see them only accept one or the other. We'll go to the next slide. So on our Education USA website, we try to break it down a little bit for you and help you out. So again, we have the 5 steps, as I mentioned, and we have those in steps in multiple different levels, for undergraduate, graduate, short term. And we also have, there's a timeline that's set on the page. And right now it's set for about 24 months is the recommended time to start thinking about studying in the United States. If you're in a shorter time span than that, don't worry, don't panic. You're still okay. It just depends on the institution, though, that some may have shorter deadlines for admissions than others. So a lot of institutions may have a deadline in, say, December for starting school the following September. Some may allow you to apply right up to the start of the semester into September, and others may have a month cutoff. Again, it just depends. Every institution is different, so you really have to do your homework. We have a lot of students will come into centers, and that's one of the first questions is, when do I apply, how do I apply, and how do I get money? And we try to get them to step back a little bit and evaluate their situation, and then start moving forward through this process that we've kind of developed. We also have define your priorities is one of the big starting keys, as I just mentioned, of figuring out what is right for you, and we'll go into that following this slide. Narrow your choices, and then prepare for your standardized tests. So define your priorities. As I mentioned, there's so many different institutions in the U.S. There's quite a few options. So what you need to look at is some of these key categories. So one, you have your type of school. So type of school could be private, it could be public, it could be religious based, it could be male or female only. You have to think about that. Special needs. Do you have any special needs? Do you need to stay here through the summer? Does the campus need to have housing so you can stay here in the summer? Things like that. You can look at financial aid. So some universities or institutions may offer more financial aid. Some may offer less. It just depends what you need. Majors. So again, universities vary very differently by what their strong points are for majors. So you need to look at that. Housing, as I mentioned previously, do you want to live on campus? Do you want to live off campus? Sometimes the institutions in big cities won't have that much housing on campus, but then your cost of living goes up because you're living off campus and having to pay for higher level housing. This could be true especially like in New York or some of the major cities, like here in Washington, D.C. as well. Cost, again, also a factor. Sports and activities. So if you're interested in sports and you want to get involved with that, some universities are very involved with sports, some of them aren't as much. Location. So location is a big one. I'm originally from Minnesota, which Minnesota is from the northern part of the United States. I grew up in Wisconsin, the state next door, but it gets very, very cold in Minnesota. I worked with international students there for years. And it was funny, I even had one student ask me if she could take a semester off just because she was so cold, she didn't feel she could make it to class. So yeah, so you're dealing with a lot of snow and a lot of cold in the north. In the south, you may get just the opposite. It's going to be very hot and very dry, depending on where you live. Or you could live in a place like us here on the East Coast, where temperatures are a little more mild, but you may get a little bit more rain. So you have all these different factors you need to look at. Also, a big one is admissions. As I mentioned, the admissions process is different. So simply by your timeline, you may have to rule some institutions out. If you've only got 6 months and the institution says, no, our deadline is a month ago, you have to cut that out. So you really need to look through a lot of these. There's many search engines, and we have an entire section on our site dedicated to this that you can go through and click on different search engines. You can search by a lot of these different factors and try to narrow down what institutions may be a good fit for you. So that would be one of my recommendations, just to start off your search, just because there's so many, is to look at that. We'll go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, further in defining your priorities, we have public institutions and we have private institutions. The public institutions you'll also hear called state institutions, and these are usually bigger schools. Sometimes they can be smaller as well, but they tend to be a little bit cheaper in price. The private universities or colleges again, they're privately owned and operated. The costs for those oftentimes tend to be higher, but in some cases they can actually offer more financial aid. So you need to look at those factors in there. With the state, when you're looking at state or public schools, just remember too, you may see two price points all the time. It'll say in-state tuition, out-of-state tuition. Usually the international students are held to the out-of-state tuition. What that means is with in-state tuition is that state governments here in the United States, so you have your federal government and state government. The state government where I live and I'm paying my taxes may subsidize those public schools, so that's why I get to go there for a cheaper price. So you're basically falling into the same bucket as a student who, say, came from another state into our state and didn't pay taxes there, and so thus they don't get the discount on the education. That's where that difference comes in. Other types, so as I mentioned before, you have some institutions that focus on science, some that focus on art, some that have religious affiliations. We have all male or all female campuses, and there's other characteristics that can play into it. Again, when you're going through some of these search engines to look for U.S. institutions, you just need to play around with those and look through them and again do quite a bit of research. Selectivity and size is also a factor you should be looking at. Selectivity is in regards to, say, if you want to go study at Harvard. Harvard is going to be obviously very, very selective. They're going to take a very small amount of students that apply. You're going to have very high test score standards, and you're going to have very high academic performance in your primary studies. So if you don't have that, you might not even make the initial kind of cut. As opposed to if you apply to other schools that may be a lot bigger and have the bar, I guess, set a little bit lower, you have a higher chance of getting in. Again, when you're applying too, you got to remember there's costs involved in applying usually, where it could be anywhere from $60 and up. A lot of times, if you get into the institution, they may refund you that or put it towards your tuition, but you're paying for these individual applications as well. So if you apply to 6 schools, and that's $60 US a piece, that suddenly becomes, what is it, $360 US. That's quite a bit of money. So you really need to think through and look at that. Also size. So you've got very small campuses that may have, maybe 1,000 students. You've got medium that could be anywhere from 5 to 15,000, and then you can go into large campuses, which I guess I would group more like 15,000 up to 30,000 or so. And those are big. When you're sitting in classes on some of those big campuses, you may do a lot more what are called PIT classes, and basically those can have easily 100 students in one class, and so you have a very high number. Those tend to be a lot of the large public schools will have those kind of pit style classes. Smaller ones will as well, but you won't have as many. Particularly the private institutions tend to, the costs will be higher because the classroom sizes are smaller. The university I previously worked at had, that was kind of one of their prides, is that they had a small campus size. Their cost was a little bit higher, but by the time you got to your junior and senior year, the classrooms, you maybe had 15 to 20 students in it. So you received a lot of attention from your professors, which again, you could be at another institution and not get that same attention. So it's just up to you and how you studied as well. Also, you may want to look at the number of international students on campus. So depending on where you're at, you may have anywhere from just a handful of international students to a very big number of international students. This helps a lot sometimes when you're just looking for friends. We try to encourage students all the time in international student services to meet with U.S. Students and try to create those interactions. But sometimes it's also nice to know that you have other people from your home country on the campus that you can interact with and stuff. So that could be an option for you. Other factors, as I mentioned, living in the West, living in the Midwest, living in the South, living in the Northeast. The U.S. is a very big country, and things differ very, very much as you go across them. Settings, urban, city, suburban, residential, or rural countryside. Some campuses may be very far out in the countryside. You may need to have a car to get around, just because there may not be a transport system that's very well embedded in the community. If you're in a city, things may be a lot easier to get around, but then you're dealing with very small living quarters. You're dealing with public transportation most of the time, and so that can be very different. Housing as well. In the city, you may have, as I mentioned, smaller place to live. If you live out more of a country campus, you may actually have a really big house for a pretty cheap amount of money. And activities, sports, music, dance, theaters, clubs. You really need to do your homework and look into this. So aid from U.S. sources. So just so you guys are aware, one of the biggest questions we get, and I've already seen a few of you ask it, is in regards to financial aid. A lot of students want financial aid. This number, I believe, is from 2012, so it's a little bit dated. But it was $7.7 billion in financial support came from the U.S. to students that were particularly international students studying in the U.S. So there is quite a bit of money out there. However, again, it's up to you to do the research and to work on applying to these institutions and applying for that funding. In many cases, it may not just be simply applying to the institution to be able to get you those funds. A lot of times you have to write essays, or you have to apply for special scholarships within those institutions, which can be a lot of work. But again, if you want the funds, they're out there, but you just have to be willing to do the work for them and do the research. Undergraduate scholarships and financial aid. So during the 2011-2012 academic year, so it's about a year out, more than 1,000 four-year regionally accredited colleges and universities gave financial aid. They awarded at least $10,000 in need or merit-based funding to international students, and they had an annual comprehensive cost of about $20,000. This brought their annual comprehensive cost to less than $20,000 with scholarships and financial aid. Graduate scholarships and financial aid. So if any of you are graduate students listening to this, so we have STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. Again, you can read here, 82% of PhD candidates, 55% of master's candidates are funded by their universities. So there's quite a bit of funding, particularly for the STEM field. If you go into humanities and social sciences at the graduate level, 56% of PhD candidates, 41% of master's candidates are funded by their universities. Other professions, so university funding, it can be rare for business, health, communications, education, law, but it is there. So you need to look for it and look on the institution you narrow it down to. Look on their financial aid section. Talk to their international student services people. They should be able to be the ones who best help you find that information. Can't say it enough. Can be research and narrow your choices. So as you're going through and looking at all these factors, obviously you're going to have to do some give and take here and there. Again, with financial aid, costs, academic programs, wherever you want to live, all of those type of things will play into your decisions. We typically recommend coming up with about 5 to 6 institutions that you can kind of narrow it down to. And then again, you can apply to all 6 institutions at one time. That's completely fine, but you may want to narrow down even further. But the key here, we believe, is finding the right fit. If you're an international student, you're coming this far, you really want to make sure that you find a university that fits you and that you are able to thrive there. We want to see you succeed, and we really hope you succeed as well too. So I'm going to show you, so this is our website. So educationusa.state.gov. So I'll leave that up for a sec. So educationusa.state.gov. When you get to the 5-step section, you'll see undergraduate, graduate, English language, short term. And then you can click Learn More to get into those individual sections. And there's, again, whole sections on financial aid, visas, all of that information is there. There's also going to be a session, I believe right after this one, that's going to be on undergraduate admissions and funding. There's another one on graduate admissions and funding that you can attend. We also have an Education USA virtual booth that we have advisors staffing all day today. So you can go into that booth. If you go out back by the college area, I believe, and you just search for Education USA, we're not a college, but we're an organization working with College Week Live in partnership with them. You can go in there, and we have advisors that can answer questions a lot more detailed than I'll actually go into here in this presentation. So we also have on our Facebook page, we have a 5-step study app, so you can play around with that and learn about studying in the United States. It lets you take some quizzes and kind of get in the mode of your research and what you need to do. So finding centers, I mentioned this earlier in the presentation. So if you go to our website, again, educationusa.state.gov, and you go to, if you see it says for international students. If you click on that, it says Find an Advising Center, and you click on Find an Advising Center, and you get this webpage. You can click on your region anywhere on the map, and then a regional page will show up with all of the countries listed that have Education USA centers in that area. If you click on that, it'll give you the exact address and phone numbers, as well as social media platforms being used by that specific center, so you can get in touch with them. Many centers have group meetings, they have phone calls that they'll take, they'll do one-on-one appointments. Most of these services are free. Some of the centers may have a couple small fee services, but for the most part, it should be free advising services that can help you and walk you through the process of studying in the United States. I'll go to the next slide. We also have a function on our website called Ask an Advisor. The Ask an Advisor function lets you submit questions virtually, basically. So you can go through, a little form will pop up after you fill some of this out. It'll ask you additional questions. You'll get sent an email with some of the questions that you asked in that instantly. And then it also gets sent to the local center near you for follow-up. So then the center will usually contact you via email and answer any more questions you have, or they may call you on the phone if you give them other contact details. So that's a great option. We also, I don't have it up here today, but we have a mobile app. And so the mobile app is just called Education USA Mobile. It can be found in the iTunes store or in the Android store. It's in both. So if you have either device, you can go ahead and find that there. It also has an Ask an Advisor form on it, and it has all of our social media, so you can follow what's kind of going on. If you're interested in the financial aid, there is actually a financial aid section in there, and there's one, again, on our website that pulls in information being reported to us from U.S. institutions on current scholarships that are just coming out and things like that. On our Facebook page, we tend to post all of those as well. So as they're being sent to us here in Washington, D.C., we try to push them out to you so you hear about them right away. So really watch that Facebook page. We have a Twitter page as well, which I'll give you the all the names for in a minute here on one of our last slides. So going through, let me just show you. So this is our Facebook page. So it's facebook.com/educationusa. We're on YouTube at Education USA TV. We're on Twitter at EdUSA Updates. These are just the main channels that are kind of run out of Washington, D.C. There are also channels that are being run in all the individual countries. So in China, there is actually a Weibo for Education USA. You can find that if you look at up Education USA China. If you go to their center page on our website, you'll see the Weibo link, and all that information is there. And we're also, I believe, on RenRen and some other platforms. So definitely check that out. Education USA China, I know we have a lot of Chinese users on today, has their own additional website as well. So definitely look at that. And we have a lot of other resources. So I guess I'm going to look through some of the questions that have come up. We do have quite a bit of time here. I went through that pretty fast. It was meant just to be a high-level overview, getting you into studying in the U.S. and just answering some general questions. But let's see if I can answer some more of these that are coming up. Let's see, Roddy asks, how are you? Is this a full scholarship? So Roddy, again, a lot of the financial aid information you're going to have to go do some research at. We have a whole section of our website dedicated just to helping you to look up financial aid information. We also have the financial aid feed on our front of our website that you could look at, or go to our Facebook pages that I just mentioned. Let's see. Jonas Phillips asked, do graduate students have a year stay back option post-study? So yeah, there is. I think what you're talking about here, Jonas, is what's called optional practical training, or OPT. And this is, it allows students basically to stay in the country for another year after they've completed a degree, and basically work full-time. This kind of depends. As a student studying in the United States, they may take other options, which may change their ability to have OPT. And so again, you would need to talk to what's called a designated school official. So as you're applying to the institution, you'll get information, and usually that information is coming from the designated school official who works with the U.S. government on the visa part of it. And they will dig into and explain any of the visa kind of intricacies and questions on things like OPT. It also will be discussed usually at length during your orientation, if you have an orientation. Let's see if I have some more questions here. So Kanishka is, what about master's program requirements for Afghan students that they apply for Afghanistan, including procedures? I'm assuming, Kanishka, you're asking just what are the general master's requirements for studying in the United States. Those, again, as I mentioned, can differ by program and by institution. So you may have to take what's called the GRE. You may have to take a GMAT, depending on the program. And different institutions will require different test scores, so how selective that they are. Usually all this information, again, will be on the international admissions page for any institution's website. They tend to be pretty clear about that. So definitely that's where you would need to look. Let's see if we have some more here. Oh, I have a lot of questions coming in. Hi, Aisha. Yes, I'm doing well. Why U.S. universities charge more fees from international students than local students? So Aisha's question is, why do U.S. universities charge more fees for international students than local students? I mentioned this previously in the presentation, but I think what you're alluding to is the out-of-state, in-state tuition. So if a U.S. student even comes out of state to a lot of institutions, they may charge that person the same as an international student. The reason is that we're paying taxes, and so part of those taxes for, say, a state go to subsidize. So they help pay for and fund those universities. So students from that state tend to get typically a cheaper tuition amount. So international students may be higher. But again, you may have other students coming from different states who are paying the same amount as an international student just because they're coming from a different state, but they're still a U.S. citizen. So again, it just depends on the situation. So let's see. Naditha Nair says, I want to study in the U.S. What are the criteria for admissions? So you'll have to go back and look at the earlier part of this presentation, and also look at, you may want to attend the undergraduate or graduate sessions that are coming up that go more into the admissions procedure. But again, they differ very much by university or institution in the United States. Everyone has a different process because it's all decentralized. So it's basically like allowing each one of you to come up with your own process for doing something. It's going to differ, and you're going to have different things that you want to focus on depending on the program as well. So let's see. So Kulan Barzavani, hopefully I said that right. He said, hello, I'm currently in the US with a J1 visa. Can I change my visa type while I'm here? I'm interested in going to graduate school. So Kulan, you need to go and speak to your designated school official or your DSO. You should have met them for an orientation when you started at the institution. It's actually mandated. So you need to go speak with them. They're the only ones who can actually help you with this situation if you're looking at trying to go to graduate school. And they can explain to you the different options that you may have. Again, it differs very much for each student. So you really need to go and speak to that person. It would be either in your international admissions office or your international student services office. One of them should at least be able to tell you who did it. Otherwise, you can also look at your DS 2019. That is the official form that you should have. If you look at that, the person's name should also be on there and signed, and so you can look that up as well. Let's see. So Jonas asks some questions about employment. So employment in the U.S., one of the big things is when coming to study here, your primary purpose of coming to the U.S. should be to study. There are some abilities to work on campus that international students can take up that are part of the visa. However, there are some off-campus opportunities, but it depends. Each university can pick and choose a little bit on how they work with that. It's called CPT, or curricular practical training, and there's a wide variety of universities that do different things. So some of them may actually not even allow CPT, so working off campus, because it's considered kind of like an internship. And other places may allow it, but they may have restrictions on it, like you actually have to take a class to take CPT, and you may have to actually pay for that class to be able to do that. And again, it's because the way the system is set up, you're not really being meant to come and work during your studies. Your primary point of being here is supposed to be study. So let me see, lots of questions coming in here. So Retriana Maharani from Indonesia. So I need to take SAT to apply to universities in the USA. Again, it depends on the institution. Usually the two big ones for undergraduate are either SAT or ACT. So you just need to look at the university's webpage, and it'll tell you that. And it'll tell you usually the score that they're looking for. Sometimes they're willing to go a little bit below that, depending on different criteria and things. But typically they'll say what their kind of standard score is for SAT or ACT, and again, what tests that they want. I hope that answers your question. Let's see. So is it Sabanarith Liang? So she had a question in regards to that she was interested in a joint program in Masters of Public Administration and SME, and she wonders if she can request financial aid from the states. Can Education USA help advise on selecting any program? Yes, so if you contact the Education USA Center nearest you, you can talk with them through some of your thoughts on the programs and institutions, and they could probably give you some feedback on that. Again, what your first step should probably do is go to our website, look at the 5 steps, start trying to narrow down what Masters of Public Administration programs you want to be in. Start looking at specific universities. Usually when you walk into a center, that'll be one of the first questions they ask you. So they can help you out a lot more if you actually go into the center having known some of this. We actually have a section on our site called Define Your Priorities, and you'll see that when you're looking through the 5 steps. if you click it, it's a form that you can basically fill out, and it helps you kind of work through thinking through some of these priorities and what best fits you. And that's always really good too to have to center when you come in to be able to work with an advisor a lot more quickly. Let's see. So Atif Ahmed, he's curious to know, is there a prerequisite to have similar education in the past? I mean, for future graduate degree in the U.S. Please let me know. So graduate degrees in the U.S., Atif, it can really depend. So they'll either look at your past coursework. If you're going, say, directly from an undergraduate into a graduate program, they'll probably look heavily at your grades and kind of what you've been doing during your undergraduate. However, most of the times when people go into graduate school, they tend to be coming out of working out in the field, I guess as we would say. So they look at, okay, so I studied, say, my undergraduate in international studies. I went and worked for 5 years at a university. Yeah, I may be a really good candidate to go to a master's of international education program. But if I want to go to a master's of, say, business administration, it may be a little bit harder for me to get in because I may not have been doing that. That would never block you from getting in. Again, they would just want to know why you're interested in the program. Again, the universities, institutions, they want to make sure that you succeed because it also helps them succeed because they're putting people out there, they're getting jobs, and they're educating them, and that's kind of the whole goal here. So Anuruddha is asking a question: what are the chances of getting a 100% scholarship? I don't know the exact chances or percentage or anything like that, Anuruddha. I guess it just depends on your previous grades, your current situation, and how you test. That's what I mean, and things like that. Again, it also depends on the institution, depending on the amount of financial aid that they may have. So you definitely want to look at that as well. There's also private scholarships you can apply to too. Sometimes they're for certain countries. You can also look, and the Education USA Center can help you with this, and see if your country also offers scholarships. In some cases, like say Saudi Arabia, they offer scholarships that fully fund their students from in the country. So you have cases like that as well. And so I guess I can't give you an exact percentage. It's not I wouldn't imagine it's a super high number. A lot of the scholarships probably tend to be like smaller, like they may be anywhere from 1,000 to 15,000, things like that, where you're picking up some of the costs. But there are full ride scholarships out there, so don't be deterred. I don't want to scare you off, but again, I don't want to also say that this is easy, that you can just go out there and get a 100% scholarship. Again, it's going to take work on your part, and it's going to take a lot of research. So let's see. Okay, as Fitriana just asked the same question I just answered. Let's see. Jonas asked another question. How do you access international students for visa interview? This may be, Jonas, you can write another question about this, but I'm thinking you're just curious about the international student visa interview process. There's a lot of information out of this online on the, usually you have to go to the consulate website, and they'll have information on student visas there. Again, we have a section on our website dedicated to the student visa process, so you can kind of see how it goes. There's multiple steps that have to take place in that. If you're on an F student visa, you'll get what's called an I-20. If you're on a J student visa, you get what's called a DS-2019. Most students, if you're applying just for a straight undergraduate or graduate program, you're going to come to the United States on an F visa. That's usually the norm. The J visa type is typically for exchanges or special programs that may be sponsored by the government. So you have different things like that. So Ma is asking, is the TOEFL or IELTS necessary for students coming from Pakistan? Ma, the TOEFL or IELTS is usually necessary for any international students coming to the United States. That's pretty much a standard. It'll be one or the other, depending on the institution, but they'll have that information always on their website, and they'll usually actually tell you the score too, so there'll be a minimum score that you need to reach. more and more U.S. institutions are offering what's called a bridging program. So what you do is you apply, but say your English score is just below, the university may accept you, but have a criteria that you have to complete a bridging program. And so you may go in there for a semester, so like 4 or 5 months, and work on your English a little bit more. And then assuming you retest and pass that, then you move on into the degree program, which they would actually have to offer you different I-20s for. So I think that's about all I have time for here today. I'm starting to lose my voice here a little bit. But I'll tell you, a lot of the questions you're asking, we can be answering in the Education USA booth. So I would think we can move the discussion there. So again, just do a search in the college area for Education USA, and we can go through and answer a lot of these questions for you. So I hope this has been really helpful to you so far. And again, there's lots of great sessions today, so make sure to get out there. Engage, talk with the institutions that are here. A lot of these people, it's in the US, we started here at 5 a.m., so I'm a little tired, but the institutions are excited to be talking to you and talking to you directly. So engage them, ask questions, don't be shy, and hopefully I'll see you in the US someday. Cheers.